He had walked the taiga east of the Lena for 13 winters, and knew the ways of a good Laika better than the ways of some men. He knew what a dog will refuse to do out of foolishness and what it will refuse to do out of sense, and he knew the difference between a dog being stubborn and a dog being afraid. Serko was not being stubborn. Serko stood at the edge of the snow-filled ravine, his ears pressed flat to his skull, settled back on his haunches, as though the ground beneath his front paws had turned hot. And when Prokhor came up and laid a hand in its stiff mitten on the dog's neck, he felt the animal trembling with a fine, rapid shiver, and that shiver had nothing whatever to do with the cold. The frost that day stood at something near 40 below, but it was dry, clear, without wind, and Serko had never once been afraid of such a frost. "There now," Prokhor said quietly, in the voice a man uses with a dog when he knows that a dog sometimes sees what a man does not yet see. "What is it, eh? What have you caught wind of?" The dog did not move. It did not even turn its head toward its master. It stared down into the ravine, and in its throat there was neither a growl nor a whine, but something thin between the two that Prokhor had not heard from him once in 6 years. Prokhor lifted his eyes and looked where the dog was looking. Below, where the ravine widened into a small, shallow valley, a village lay under the snow. He did not see it at once. The snow of 12 winters had settled over it so thickly and so evenly that it had become a part of the slope, and only when his eye caught on one roof, on the straight, true line of a ridgepole beneath a white hump of drift, did he make out the rest. 8, 10. 12 log houses buried to the very eaves of their roofs, sunk in the snow to the windows, and some of them higher than the windows, with the dark tops of chimneys jutting from the whiteness. 12 chimneys, and from one of them, from the middle of the village, smoke was rising. In a thin, even, perfectly straight thread it went up into the still frozen air, and it did not break and did not bend, because there was no wind to bend it. The white smoke of a living stove, the smoke of a house in which someone had lit a fire that morning and in which there was someone to keep it burning. Prokhor stood and looked at that smoke, and in his chest there came that cold and watchful thing that comes to a man of the taiga when he sees something that cannot be where it is. There was no village here. There should have been none. He had walked these ravines for 13 winters, and not one Russian trapper, not one Yakut, not one Tungus, not one Evink of all those with whom he had shared a winter camp and a fire, had ever, not with a single word, spoken to him of a village in this place. And the taiga remembers dwellings. The taiga does not forget where people have stood, and if anyone had ever lived here, someone would have known, and Prokhor would have known. And the smoke rose. He began to go down. He did it slowly, with that pliant caution driven into the very bone that the taiga gives to a man who wishes to walk it again next year. He set a foot down, testing the crust, and only then put his weight on it. Serko did not follow him. Prokhor looked back once and again, and both times the dog stood in the same place, up above at the edge of the ravine. And Prokhor remembered this for the whole of the rest of his life. It stood now with its back to the village. It had turned its back and was watching its master, and in its eyes there was what there is in the eyes of a dog that has already decided something for itself and will not change that decision for any man, and for no kindness at all. The first house he came to was buried to the very windows, but its door had been cleared, not drifted over, not buried under the snow of 12 winters, but cleared evenly, neatly, the way a door is cleared through which people pass every day. The snow at the threshold was trodden flat. Prokhor stood a moment, looking at that trodden little path to a stranger's door, and knocked. No one answered. He called out, by the custom of the taiga, the way one calls to an unknown house so that no harm comes to host or to guest. No one answered. Then he pulled the door, and it gave easily, without a creak, without resistance, the way a door gives when it is watched over, whose hinges have been greased by a caring hand. Inside the house it was warm, not the cooling warmth that lingers in an abandoned house from yesterday's fire and is gone by morning, but a living warmth, the warmth of a house whose stove had been lit that day from first light. Prokhor took off his mitten and held his palm over the mouth of the stove, and heat came from the stove. Embers still glowed red inside it. There was food on the table. Not the leavings of food, not dry crusts left behind by a man leaving his house for a long time, but a table laid and ready for a meal, 3 wooden bowls. In 2 of them the porridge had been started, from the third no one had eaten at all. The porridge was still warm, bread lay cut beside the knife, and its cut was fresh, soft, not gone stale. There stood a jug of milk, and the milk had not frozen and had not even skinned over on top, the way milk skins over in the cold. And in the pot of porridge, a spoon stood upright, stood as though the hand that had been spooning out the porridge had risen from the table for a single moment and would, right now, this very minute, come back and finish the rest. Prokhor stood and looked at that spoon longer than he looked at anything else that whole day. Then he went round the house. On the stove, on the sleeping ledge, foot wraps were drying, laid out evenly, the way a man lays them out who means to put on dry ones in the morning. In the icon corner, beneath the holy images, an oil lamp was burning. It burned with an even small flame, and there was oil in its dish. Living oil, not burned down to the bottom, oil enough to burn for many more hours. On a bench by the window lay unspun wool, and a spindle was thrust into the wool, and the thread on the spindle was left half twisted, broken off in the middle of a turn. Beneath the ceiling, on a bent pole, hung a cradle, and in the cradle lay a swaddling cloth, folded in four, clean, waiting. Everything in this house was ready for life. Everything was tidied, set right, begun. There were only no people to live that life. Prochor went out into the air and stood, looking at the white thread of smoke over the middle house. Then he walked through the village and went round the whole of it, all 12 houses. In each of them it was the same. In each the stove had been lit that morning, and the heat held, and food stood on the table, and a lamp burned in the corner, and work begun had been abandoned in the middle of a motion. In one house, a length of cloth was spread on the table, and on the cloth lay a pair of scissors, open, as though drawn away from the fabric on a single breath. In another, a spinning wheel turned from the draught Prochor had let in, turned and stopped. In a third, a small iron pot stood on the hearth shelf, and something was cooking in it, and steam rose from it. In a fourth, an open book lay on a bench, a psalter written by hand, and it lay face down, open at the place where the one reading it had left off. Prochor lifted it, looked, and set it back as it had lain. And nowhere a single person, neither living nor dead. Not an old man on the stove, not a child in the cradle, not a master of the house, not a mistress. Not a sign of a struggle, not a drop of blood, not an overturned bench, not a chest flung open in haste. Not a sign of trouble, not a sign of hurry. 12 houses, filled to the brim with everyday, quiet, well-ordered life, out of which the life had gone without leaving behind either a body to bury or a mark to read. Prochor was a man whose eye the taiga had taught to read the snow, the way a priest reads the psalter letter by letter. And so, having gone round the houses, he began to read the snow. The night before, fresh snow had fallen and lain over everything in an even untouched cover, soft, holding a print as cleanly as springtime wax holds it. Along this snow Prochor now walked, going round the village in a wide circle and looking for what any man of the taiga would look for, the track of a departure, where they had gone, in which direction. He found his own track, coming into the village from above, from the ravine. He found Serko's track, breaking off up there, at the edge where the dog had turned back. He found around the houses a trodden circle, trampled over many days, where the villagers had walked about their daily business, to the well, to the woodpiles. From house to house, hundreds of tracks, large and small, men's, women's, children's, the tracks of felt boots and the tracks of small bare children's feet that had run out for a moment without being shod. And this trodden circle broke off. It broke off at the last houses, at the edge of the village, exactly where the yard ended and the clean, untouched, snowy waste began. And beyond it, not a single track went on, not in any direction, not toward sunrise, not toward sunset, not toward the river, not toward the forest. Prochor went round the whole village along its outer line twice, looking at his feet, and the waste beyond the village lay smooth, even, clean, without a single print, as though the villagers had reached the edge of their yards, and there had ceased to be anywhere at all. He stood on that boundary, between the trodden snow of the yard and the untouched snow of the waste, and for a long time could not move from the spot. Something was wrong with the light as well. Prochor did not understand at once what exactly it was, and when he understood, he was sorry that he had. The shadows of the houses, of the chimneys, of the woodpiles, lay on the snow wrongly. They lay not the way they should have lain in the low winter sun that had stood over the forest since noon. They lay a little aslant, a little not in the right direction, by the smallest amount, so that the eye, accustomed for 13 winters to read the time by shadows, stumbled and could not reconcile what it saw with what it knew. And in one of the dark windows, as he passed it, Prochor saw his own reflection, and that reflection swayed and repeated his movement with a small, barely noticeable delay, as though it lagged behind him by a quarter of a heartbeat. He did not look into the window a second time. Prochor went back into the first house, to the table where the porridge was cooling in 3 bowls, and stood over it. Then he took off his hat. He crossed himself before the lamp and before the icon that burned in the red corner, and, still not yet knowing why, knowing only that he could not go out from here and leave that little flame burning uncovered in a house in which no one would live any more, he took the icon down from the shelf. It was an image of St. Nicholas the Wonder Worker, darkened by time and by the soot of the lamp. Prochor wrapped it in a clean linen cloth that hung beside it on a peg, embroidered along the edge in red, and laid it against his body beneath his sheepskin coat. Then he shut the door of that house behind him. the way a door is shut on a house from which a dead man is carried, and went away up toward the ravine where the dog waited for him. And as soon as he climbed to the edge and came up out of the valley, Serko came to him at once, pressed his muzzle against his knee, and stood so, leaning against him, and the dog's trembling eased only when the village was hidden behind their backs and the white thread of smoke was gone from sight. Prokhor walked east until full dark, and then on in the dark, by moonlight, over the crust, and covered 40 versts that day, to the winter hut where an old Yakut by the name of Nikita trapped, a baptized man, but one who remembered also what there had been before baptism. He told Nikita all of it, as it had been. Nikita listened, not interrupting, not asking again, for long winters in the taiga had taught him to listen before he spoke. When Prokhor had finished, the old man was silent so long that the wood burned through in the hearth, and Nikita laid on fresh, and only then he said, "My grandfather knew about such places, not about this village, but about such places." He used to say it thus: "There are places in this land older than we are, and this land has old masters, older than the Russians and older than the Yakuts, older than any who walk here. They are not evil. Do not think that they are evil. They have no concern with our malice and no concern with our kindness, because they are older than the one and the other. He used to say they come sometimes and take what they have come for, and go, and if they have come for people, then they take people, and the people go with them as smoke goes into the sky, leaving no trace," he used to say. "If you find in the taiga a village where warm food is cooling on the table and the tracks break off at the last house and go no further, do not look for the answer. You will not be given the answer. Cross yourself if you are baptized and go away." Nikita was silent and added more quietly, "And he used to say this too. Do not put out the fire in such a house, and do not leave the icon uncovered, because a house is a house so long as a lamp burns in it, and it is not for a man to put out another man's house, even if its masters have gone away to where there is no returning." "I took the icon," Prokhor said. "I could not leave it. I wrapped it in a linen cloth, and am carrying it." The old man nodded, and something like relief passed over his face. "You did right to take it. Now it is yours. Keep it and do not throw it away, and pass it on to the one who comes after you, and forget the road to that village. You will not find it in any case, for such places do not show themselves to one man twice. But do not tell of it either, except before your very death, to the one man who will remain after you. So my grandfather bade me, so I bid you." Prokhor Koltsov trapped in that taiga for 19 more winters, and never again found that village, though twice in the first years he went to look for it, and both times came out in the wrong place. In the year 1915, when 72 years of age, dying in his son's house, he called his grandson to his bedside and told him the story, the only time in his whole life, and bade him write it down after his death and keep it in the family, but not print it and not show it to strangers, because he had given his word to Nikita, and a word given to a man of the taiga is kept even after the one to whom it was given has been laid in the earth. The grandson wrote it down. That notebook passed through the family across 2 wars and 1 revolution, and with it was kept the image of St. Nicholas the Wonder Worker, taken by Prokhor from the shelf in the village under the snow, a darkened image, wrapped in a decayed linen cloth embroidered along the edge in red, which no one in the family had unwrapped for more than 50 years. And in the last part of his account, the part the grandson wrote down word for word, as he heard it, Prokhor Koltsov said this: "I took the icon because I could not leave it burning in a house where there would be no more people. I carried it 40 versts against my breast, and all 40 versts. I thought about the 3 bowls of cooling porridge, and about the spoon that stood upright in the pot, and about the tracks that broke off at the last house and went no further in any direction. I thought about it for 19 winters, and this is what I have come to think, and I have no other for you. There are places in this land older than the people who live upon it now, and older than the people who lived upon it before us. Nikita's grandfather knew this, and his grandfather's grandfather knew it, and they told their grandsons not to go into such places, and not to put out the fire in them and to go away, having crossed themselves. I believed Nikita, as Nikita believed his grandfather, and I went away, and Serko went away before me, because a dog scents what a man does not scent, and a man who wants to live to see gray hair listens to the dog. I do not know where the people from that village went, and I do not want to know. I know only that the food on their table was still warm, and that there were no tracks leaving their yards in any direction, and that the old masters of this land came and took what they had come for, and that there was in this neither evil nor good, but that which is older than evil, and then good, and which should be no concern of ours. To my grandson, and to those who come after him, I will say one thing. If you ever walk the taiga and see a village under the snow, with an even white smoke rising from its chimney, and your dog will not go down to it, but backs away, and sits, and trembles, do not go down. Pass it by. But if you do go down and see warm food cooling on the table and a spoon standing upright, and tracks that break off at the last house, Cross yourselves, take the icon. If it burns uncovered, shut the door behind you quietly and go away. And do not look for the road to that place a second time, because it will not show itself to you, and that is a mercy to you and not an insult. Go away, go home, leave the old villages to their old masters. In this is all the wisdom I have gained in 72 years, and I have no other for you.